Xian Tong is known as the queen of part-time jobs. She doesn't turn down any work. Today, as a favor to her best friend, she agreed to go ruin a blind date. The person she was meeting turned out to be Payan, the heir to the C-High group. As soon as she got there, Xian Tong planned to pretend to smoke to create a bad impression, but a staff member stopped her right away. She immediately impersonated Xian in front of Payan and acted ridiculous, twisting her body way too much, just hoping he would get annoyed and leave. However, in Payan's eyes, that image strangely matched the person he was looking for. He knew full well she was an imposter but stayed silent and watched, curious to see how far Xian Tong could take the act. When Xian Tong sat down and took off her coat to show her sexy shoulders, she intentionally acted way too forward. Payan doesn't like beating around the bush, so he pushed things along faster than expected. His words and actions made Xian Tong freeze up immediately, realizing she had met a tough opponent. Even though she hesitated, he still pulled her into the elevator. Facing such an overwhelming vibe, Xian Tong panicked and just wanted to find a way to back out as soon as possible, fearing that if she was a second too late, she would be swallowed whole by a wild beast. When the elevator doors opened, she made up an excuse about leaving something in the car to get away, but Payan didn't give her a chance to escape. He pulled her into the room and even carried her straight to the bed, scaring Xian Tong so much that she turned pale. In her panic, she tried to stall for time, but Payan acted more and more teasing. By the time he used his tie to cover her eyes and moved closer, Xian Tong exploded in resistance, kicking him in the crotch and beating him up because she thought he was a pervert. Taking advantage of the chaos, she immediately ran away. When she received a transfer of 5,000 yuan, her mood instantly lifted. She took the chance to snap a few photos to post on Wa. But right at that moment, she discovered Payan's car was following closely behind. Panicking, Xian Tong told the driver that a bad guy was chasing them. Hearing this, the driver sped up as much as he could, starting a thrilling chase on the streets. The small tricycle weaved skillfully through the traffic. When the green light had only 4 seconds left, the driver risked it and dashed through the intersection. Meanwhile, Payan was forced to stop at the red light. So, he lost track of Xian Tong and was so mad he couldn't control himself. As for Xian Tong, having just escaped danger, she was shaking so much she threw up as soon as she got out of the vehicle. But once she got back to her room, she acted like a different person, continuing to post a bunch of photos and sharing her journey of the day. Xian Tong currently owns 5 Xiao lawn shoe accounts, covering all kinds of topics. She always dreamed of being a real queen on social media. She thought this big villa was where she was hired to live, but it turned out she was just the cleaner and even worked as a housekeeper. The thing Xian Tong couldn't believe most was that the owner of that house was actually Payan. When Payan came home, he went straight to the bathroom. After Xian Tong finished cleaning outside, she went into the bathroom to keep working. Seeing the bathroom full of steam, she thought Sisterly forgot to turn off the water, so she felt her way in. In the thick mist, the silhouette of a naked man suddenly appeared in front of her, making her scream in shock. Thinking she had run into a pervert again, Payan immediately pinned her against the wall and questioned the intruder's identity. Only when they both saw each other's faces clearly were they stunned. She sincerely apologized to Payan, explaining that this was her first time in a situation like this and she hadn't done anything over the line. On the other hand, she remembered his handsy moves at the hotel earlier, making the tension a bit awkward. Payan gave her 2 clear options. One was for Xian Tong to pack her things and leave the house right away, and he would tell the whole story to Xian's parents, so she could deal with the consequences herself. 2 was that she didn't need to do part-time work anymore and would keep pretending to be Xian, just playing his girlfriend in front of others to maintain the image of a perfect couple to hide her true identity. Xian Tong carefully weighed every possibility and finally decided to go with the second option, stepping into a fake relationship full of hidden agendas. It all started the day before. While Payan was still at home, his dad gave him a clear ultimatum. If Payan wanted to inherit C-High, he had to go on a blind date as the family requested, or else the company would go down under his lead. Payan was annoyed, thinking his dad was just a rich heir who lacked any drive. The father calmly pointed out that keeping the family assets in perfect condition was what really mattered. Realizing this was the key to taking over the company, Payan reluctantly agreed to go on the date. Afterward, he told Xian Tong about a 3-month lover contract. During this time, she had to meet his parents and show up in public as a real couple without letting her true identity slip. Xian Tong immediately agreed to the proposal of 3 different levels of frequency, duration, and intimacy, with each level having a different price tag. Payan set the number of dates to 25, each lasting no more than 2 hours, and decided that he would cover all costs, including clothes, makeup, taxis, in compensation for her lost income. He also strictly told her that she absolutely could not date anyone else during the partnership and could not develop real feelings. Xi and Tong promised that once they were done, they would break up peacefully and have no further connection. The two of them shook hands to start the deal. The next morning, Xi and Tong drove to the C High group to start her work. Xi and Tong was in charge of running the live streams at C High, handling everything from product selection and strategy to finding long-term suppliers. At the same time, Payan arrived at the headquarters to confirm the completion of the teddy bear charms and got into the elevator, while Xi and Tong went down to the lobby to pick up food, luckily avoiding a run-in. When Director Hua came back from a meeting, she mentioned that the new CEO looked like a refined, classy gentleman, the perfect image of a top-tier young master. When Payan's magazine cover got smudged by water, Xi and Tong cleverly put a sticker over the wet spot, hoping he wasn't just a silver spoon kid who lacked leadership skills. Payan told his dad that the blind date from the other day went great and that it was love at first sight. The chairman was excited and told his son to just focus on work and take his relationship seriously. Payan also mentioned that the company had just launched a feather teddy bear phone charm, which the chairman liked so much he immediately hooked it onto his phone. On his way out, the chairman told his secretary to watch Pei and closely to check if he was actually dating properly. However, the clever Payan had planted a bug in his dad's phone charm, making it easy for him to catch every suspicious move and stay in control of the situation. At the C High office, Xi and Tong received an email from Galileo asking for more data for a plan, which frustrated her because the workload was way beyond her capability. Right at that moment, her phone buzzed with a text from Payan setting a date for that night at 6:30 at Sutta Delight. He said if she was late, her pay would be cut in half. Even though she hated the pressure, Xi and Tong texted back saying she'd try to be there early. Xi and Tong rushed there right on time and explained she was almost late because work was busy, especially since she had a creepy boss who always kept her occupied. Payan just smirked, handed her a bouquet, and reminded her about the eyes and ears watching them. Looking around, Xi and Tong realized the number of people watching was actually more than she had imagined. She grabbed Payan's hand to signal that this was S+ level intimacy, emphasizing that there would be an extra fee. The restaurant staff recognized Xi and Tong and were very welcoming because she was famous online. When they found out she had written a review on Shaolin Shu, their attitude changed instantly, and they low-key wanted to kick them out. But just then, another employee showed up and announced that a famous blogger, Little Pink Pig, was also dining at the restaurant today. Xi and Tong immediately showed them she was that blogger, causing the staff's attitude to flip completely. They welcomed them warmly and even brought out a bottle of wine on the house. Meanwhile, at the next table, two bodyguards immediately called Chairman, one to report that they had set a total trap and were live streaming the whole thing. The chairman watched from his phone and saw his son on the date, but commented that the level of intimacy still wasn't enough. During dinner, even though Xi and Tong couldn't stand wasabi, she had to swallow a piece of vegetable and then immediately got back at him by forcing Pei and to eat a piece of meat covered in wasabi. Payan's eyes watered immediately because it was so spicy, making Chairman smirk through the phone screen, emphasizing that the progress was too slow and asking when they would finally kiss. Payan suddenly pulled X and Tong close and gave her a quick, rushed kiss. The bodyguards immediately turned on a full live stream with no blind spots, so the chairman could see every single move clearly. Seeing his son kiss passionately, Chairman grinned, feeling both excited and satisfied. As soon as Xi and Tong and Payan left, the restaurant staff were allowed to go home. The two bodyguards continued to watch from outside Payan's house. Realizing he was being watched, he used large photos and a wig to fake intimacy and distract them. Just then, Xi and Tong walked in and thought he was a pervert. As Payan scrambled to explain, he slipped and fell onto the bed, accidentally kissing her, which shocked both of them. At the same time, on the other end, Chairman was watching the screen when the picture suddenly went dark. The two bodyguards panicked, made an excuse about a camera glitch, and quickly turned it off. They knew perfectly well their job was to follow the chairman's orders, but they also absolutely couldn't get on the bad side of the future heir to C High. Inside the room, Payan lowered his voice, admitting he got a black eye from Xi and Tong as the prize for crossing the line, and suggested they call a draw. Xi and Tong agreed, but set a clear boundary, saying all future dates must follow the contract and today's incident must never happen again, or the contract would be void right away. Outside, the two bodyguards even carefully lip-read from the remaining video footage to report back to Chairman Wen. When they misread it as the two of them discussing having a baby, Chairman Wen was overjoyed, believing even more that this relationship was moving along smoothly. The next morning, in the elevator, the employees were gossiping excitedly about the new CEO, Payan, which made him unable to hide his smug face. When someone mentioned Rico and the magazine, Xi and Tong made a sarcastic comment that the photo was only worth being toilet paper, making everyone in the elevator laugh. Meanwhile, Peyton angrily made a note of the name Rico in room 28. The ironic thing was that he had no idea Rico was actually Xi and Tong. In a fit of annoyance, Payne immediately sent an email in French, giving Rico the task of submitting a full, detailed schedule of all work for the next 4 quarters, with a deadline by the end of today. Seeing that email, Director Hua and Stella couldn't help but feel suspicious, thinking Xi and Tong might have offended the CEO, even speculating he was acting like a bossy CEO because he had a crush on her. Xi and Tong could only sigh and advise Stella to stop reading so many novels. Olu didn't understand why Payne held such a grudge, while Payne casually thought it was just a small punishment for an employee. Through the bug, Payne learned his father had asked the surveillance team to watch more closely, doubting the relationship was just an act if it didn't last more than 3 months. Realizing that, he understood the situation wasn't simple at all. Not long after, Olu received an email saying Rico had done an excellent job on the task. Right away, Payne called Xi and Tong and set a date for tonight at 7 o'clock with double the pay. Even though she was exhausted, the moment she heard about money, Xi and Tong's eyes lit up, and she agreed without hesitation. In the taxi, Xi and Tong got a call from Xian asking her to work tonight for double the fee, and she accepted immediately. As soon as she met Payne, Xi and Tong proactively hugged him and suggested they try dating in a private space. Shortly after, she led him to a place decorated in 90s style, arranging it so each person would go in a different direction and meet at the end. Taking that chance, Xi and Tong quietly turned another way to finish the job Xian gave her. Unexpectedly, the person she had to go on a blind date for was her senior from school. At that moment, the 2 bodyguards showed up and discovered Xi and Tong was secretly meeting another man behind Payne's back. Hearing the report, Chairman Wen wasn't angry at all. Instead, he thought an outstanding girl would naturally have many pursuers, which made Payne need to hurry up even more. On this side, Payne was so scared out of his mind that he was screaming and running all over the place. At the restaurant, when Laku realized Xi and Tong was intentionally dressing ridiculously to ruin the blind date, he frankly admitted that he was also being forced by his family. He didn't agree with business marriages. He just didn't expect to meet her again in such an awkward way and noticed that Xi and Tong was becoming more and more beautiful. Right then, Payne showed up looking really annoyed, making Chairman Wen, who was watching through the camera, unable to stop laughing, feeling that this drama was getting more and more interesting. Xi and Tong explained that Xian's family had arranged the date, while Payne warned her that there were love-monitoring agents all around, making her actions extremely dangerous. Panicking, Xi and Tong looked around and quickly hugged Payne, apologizing for a momentary slip-up. Payne felt bitter and embarrassed, thinking people looking in would think he was being cheated on. Xi and Tong asked him to give her a minute to handle it. Right after that, she went back to explain to Laku that Payne was just a close guy friend who recently went through a bad breakup and had to follow her everywhere. Laku believed her and even proactively invited Payne to eat with them. During the meal, Payne intentionally acted intimate, personally feeding Xi and Tong cake despite Laku. Chairman Wen sat back and relaxed, snacking while watching the play in front of him. But when he saw the 3 of them sitting together peacefully, he started to feel that something was a bit strange, even getting the idea to add more plot twists. After the meal, Laku asked to see Xi and Tong again another time and wished Payne would find someone more deserving soon. That comment made Payne feel very confused and uncomfortable. He pulled Xi and Tong away right after. In the car, Payne demanded that during the contract period, Xi and Tong couldn't take any more part-time jobs like that. But Xi and Tong frankly expressed her non-stop ambition to make money. Because her dream is to retire at 36 and spend the rest of her life enjoying herself, there is currently no job she would turn down. The next morning, Olu announced that Payne had arranged to meet all the clients at a cafe to improve efficiency. The truth was that the night before, Chairman Wen had told Olu that he wanted his son to meet more girls, so this schedule was intentionally set up. At the cafe, Olu arranged for many different girls to meet Payne, giving him a chance to choose. As soon as the meeting started, Olu called Chairman Wen to report that the blind dates had begun. Hearing this, the chairman immediately told Olu to invite Xian to the cafe and have her sit at the very next table. While Payne was talking with the girls, 2 of them left right away because they weren't happy with him. The reason wasn't that they didn't match, but that their values didn't align. Right after that, Ply, a rich socialite, stepped up to join the meeting. Olu made an excuse that the police outside were giving out parking tickets, so he could leave and avoid all the attention. The 2 bodyguards noticed Xi and Tong had appeared and quickly signaled Payan. From a distance, seeing Payan talking to the girls with gossip-hungry eyes everywhere, Xi and Tong guessed he was putting on an act and decided to join the plan. She walked over to hug Payan and introduced herself to Bly as his girlfriend. Payan quickly tried to warn her, but Xi and Tong had already staged a jealous scene. Bly reacted immediately, showing she was clearly unhappy. Payan angrily turned to Xi and Tong and asked what she was trying to do. So Xi and Tong reminded him that he was the one who called her there. She showed Payan the text on her phone, and that's when he realized his phone had been taken by Olu. All the texts coordinating the performance were actually from Olu's phone. Looking around, Payan realized there were so many people watching. From the shop staff to the surveillance bodyguards, it left him completely speechless. Xi and Tong immediately kept acting out the jealous scene to make a point, and then walked away, leaving Payan stunned in the middle of the cafe. Right after, Olu showed up and explained that everything was ordered by Chairman 1. He was just following orders. Payan warned Olu that if he dared to trick him again, he'd force him into the live stream room to perform, even making him dance and shake in front of all the customers. Finally, Payan went to talk to his father, directly confirming everything and demanding an explanation for why he made such a mess. Chairman 1 immediately apologized to his son, confessing that Olu came up with it all, while Olu could only stay silent. Mrs. Wen added that Payan should bring his girlfriend home for dinner tomorrow, which Payan agreed to right away. He went back to tell Xi and Tong about the plan for tomorrow. The next day, although Xi and Tong was still a bit hesitant deep down, she still sat at the dinner table with Payan's parents with a bright smile. Chairman 1 wanted to test if the couple's relationship was really genuine. So he cleverly poured a glass of milk mixed with barley powder and handed it to Payan immediately. Xi and Tong skillfully stepped in, explaining that Payan was allergic to gluten and offered to drink the milk for him. Her quick wit and thoughtfulness made Chairman 1 very impressed. The chairman continued to pry, mentioning that Payan's birthday was coming up and asking if the two had any plans. Xi and Tong calmly replied that his birthday was still 2 months away, but she had already quietly prepared a gift for him. The crafty chairman 1 kept asking tough questions, but Xi and Tong handled them skillfully, even showing off a few Italian phrases, making him feel like nothing was out of the ordinary. Finally, he was satisfied and reminded them to live harmoniously with each other. On the way back, Payan was curious about when Xi and Tong learned Italian. She explained she had just picked up a few phrases from a movie before and didn't expect them to come in handy today. Feeling she had done great in front of Payan's family today, Xi and Tong had an idea. She wanted to use Payan as a model for a photo shoot for a new wedding ring sample she just received. Payan was a bit hesitant because he was afraid of showing his face, but Xi and Tong reminded him that this was to pay back a previous debt, so he had to go along with it. When Xi and Tong changed into beautiful clothes and walked down, Payan couldn't help but see her in a different light. Feeling both surprised and unable to look away, she immediately set up the camera, posed nonstop, and took photos for the ring sample. Because she was totally focused on work, Xi and Tong casually hugged Payan to pose, not realizing that his heart was racing because they were so close. While posing, Xi and Tong told Payan to imagine she was the company's financial report making a profit, which made him laugh and look at her intently. Noticing that Payan's gaze didn't show the love she wanted, Xi and Tong adjusted her instructions, telling him he could imagine she was anything as long as his eyes were full of affection. Next, Xi and Tong switched to a romantic photo style. She even took off Payan's jacket and placed her hand on his chest to pose, acting both skillful and excited, making the whole place feel full of intimacy disguised as work. A romantic date scene was set up. The two of them held hands, creating some very sweet photos. After posing for a while, they had many beautiful photos. Xi and Tong thanked Payan for being so cooperative. Payan noticed her hands were a bit cold and reminded her that she should see a traditional medicine doctor. When he was about to go to his room to rest, Xi and Tong playfully invited him to stay and have a drink with her. Right after that, Xi and Tong skillfully kept making Payan raise his glass to toast her. After a while, the alcohol started to kick in, and she slowly got tipsy. Her voice was sweet yet a bit awkward as she revealed to Payan that she already had a boyfriend. When Payan realized the person she was talking about was actually money, he burst out laughing, both because of the truth and because he found her so money-hungry. In her drunken state, Xi and Tong bared her soul to Payan. She admired Payan for having the love and pampering of his parents, something she had never experienced herself. Born abandoned, she grew up in an orphanage. She only dared to secretly admire the kids who were taken out by their parents. When she was 7, she ran away from the orphanage, determined to find her parents. She talked about a small but warm memory of when she was sitting sadly by herself, and a kind boy gave her a piece of cake and some money, telling her to go home soon because her parents were worried. Xi and Tong proudly bragged to Pei and that she was very smart. She could learn anything new just by seeing it a few times. But society today cares too much about degrees, which makes things hard for her. She expressed gratitude to her current company for not caring much about degrees. But recently a new boss took over and threw out all the plans she had worked so hard to prepare. Worried the company would be ruined, she dragged Pei into bad-mouthing the new boss, calling him a jerk and an idiot. Pei indulged her and listened to her vent. Tipsy from the wine, Xi and Tong fell against Pei. In that close moment, both of them unconsciously leaned in to kiss. When she woke up the next morning, Xi and Tong was shocked to find she had almost no clothes on. She immediately started cursing at Pei and calling him a jerk and questioning him about what happened last night. Pei acted pretty nonchalant, insisting he didn't do anything, but Xi and Tong didn't buy it. She demanded to check the rooftop camera. Finally, when she checked the footage, she realized the hilarious truth. She had vomited all over Pei and overwhelmed with guilt. She immediately stripped off his shirt to wash it and locked him out on the balcony, leaving Pei to freeze all night. Seeing him so cold that he had to wrap himself in plastic bags, she couldn't help but laugh. The next morning, the cleaner saw Pei all bundled up in plastic bags and was just speechless. Xi and Tong quickly apologized and promised to wash his shirt right away. Right then, she got a call from work saying the marketing department had to meet with the general manager, Galileo, this morning. When Pei went outside and saw Xi and Tong struggling to fix her bike, he offered her a ride, and Xi and Tong quickly thanked him, asking him to take her to the C-High building. While driving, Pei curiously asked Xi and Tong why she was going to the C-High building. When he found out she was going there for work, he finally realized that when Xi and Tong was angrily bad-mouthing the new boss the night before, she was actually bad-mouthing him. A feeling of betrayal mixed with anger made Pei unable to hold back his irritation. When they got to the company, Xi and Tong thanked Pei and invited him to have dinner with her tonight. Not long after, while she was delivering documents, she accidentally bumped into Pei, and he told her he was the general manager's assistant. Xi and Tong introduced herself as Rico from the marketing department. Realizing the truth, Pei finally knew that Rico was Xi and Tong. To keep up the act, Olu pretended to be the general manager, reminding them both not to be late for work before leaving. When they walked into the meeting, to avoid revealing his identity to Xi and Tong, Pei sat in a staff chair. The boss's appearance in that spot surprised everyone. However, when the new product plan presented by Olu was too stupid, Pei was forced to speak up and suggest a better operation strategy. Meanwhile, Xi and Tong thought to herself that there were way too many problems for her first day of work. When Pei shared his sharp ideas, Xi and Tong realized he was even smarter than the new general manager. She worried the company might be turned upside down if things kept going this way. After the performance ended, Olu asked Pei about his acting, but he just shook his head, thinking he was beyond stupid. Olu was also curious why he didn't want her to know his real identity, but Pei didn't answer. In the elevator, Pei got a text from Xi and Tong inviting him to lunch. Seeing Pei smile, Olu blurted out that the smile looked both happy and a bit creepy, making Pei order him to shut up. Xi and Tong asked Pei to go out for lunch with her near the office. During the meal, she asked why he was working at C-High as the general manager's assistant, guessing it was because of his task to find a contract girlfriend to inherit the family business. So he brought her into the group to learn before going back to take over his own family's company. Pei just smiled and confirmed her guess. Xi and Tong continued to talk about the new general manager. Since he looked so stupid, she said Pei wouldn't learn anything from being by his side, which made him unable to even swallow his food. Right after that, she asked Pei about Qi Xing, an internet celebrity, wanting him to help convince the new boss to sign a contract or collaborate on a live stream with her. When Olu texted to say that Qi Xing was back, Pei's expression changed. Sensing the urgency, Xi and Tong urged him to eat quickly so he could get back to work. As soon as Qi Xing landed at the airport, she was surrounded by a sea of screaming fans, which showed just how famous she was. Pei worried about what kind of trouble Qi Xing would cause for him this time. The next morning, Pei told Olu that he must absolutely avoid choosing Qi Xing. He also emphasized that if Qi Xing tried to fish for information, Olu must not reveal the real relationship between him and Xi and Tong. Just then, Xi and Tong appeared, and Olu immediately pretended to scold Pei and to keep his identity hidden. Xi and Tong frankly stated her view that Qi Xing was the best fit for the image of a modern, independent woman. Olu disagreed, saying Qi Xing wasn't suitable. However, Xi and Tong argued that although Qi Xing came from a wealthy family, she never relied on them and worked her way up to become a top streamer. making her a perfect role model for women today. Faced with that argument, Payan turned and suggested that Olu seriously consider Xian Tong's opinion. Even so, Olu firmly refused, while Xian Tong insisted on choosing Qi Xing. Annoyed by the standoff, Olu ordered a new livestream plan within 3 days and dismissed the meeting. Later, Payan asked Olu to help him meet Qi Xing because she said she wanted to see him, and he wanted to see what she was up to. During the break, director Hua almost begged Xian Tong to leave Qi Xing alone. But the only thought in Xian Tong's head was tying Galileo to a Roman pillar and burning him alive to vent her anger. In the evening, while working late, Stella revealed to Xian Tong that Qi Xing was actually Galileo's twin sister. Hearing that, Xian Tong immediately understood that this was an inheritance battle between the two siblings. She thought to herself that the more it was like that, the less she could let that annoying general manager get what he wanted, and she definitely had to help the princess take the throne. The next morning, Xian Tong proactively went to see Qi Xing, introducing herself as an operations specialist for the Sihai Group. Her goal was to invite Qi Xing to be a guest on a food livestream. She presented a contract saying that if Qi Xing agreed, she would go back and convince the company. Qi Xing expressed that she didn't want to go to Sihai just as a guest, but seeing Xian Tong's sincerity, she still agreed to look at the contract before deciding. While waiting, Xian Tong accidentally saw a pretty intimate photo of Pei and Qi Xing on the phone. Suspicion immediately kicked in. She assumed Pei used to date Qi Xing, but they broke up, and Qi Xing still wasn't over him. She realized this was her breakthrough. After reading the contract, Qi Xing said she wasn't considering collaborating with Sihai yet. Taking the chance, Xian Tong cleverly suggested that the relationship between Qi Xing and the person in the photo was likely an old flame. They broke up, but she still kept him as her wallpaper, showing there were still feelings. She claimed she could help them get back together. Believing that no man could turn down an amazing girl like Qi Xing, seeing Xian Tong mistake a sibling relationship for romance. Qi Xing found it hilarious and signed a contract right away. Just then, Olu appeared, wondering why Xian Tong was there. She calmly said she was representing the small stars to visit Qi Xing and then left. Afterward, Olu told Qi Xing the whole truth. From a relationship between Pei and Xian Tong to the fact that Pei was hiding his identity as the CEO and only claiming to be an assistant. Hearing this, Qi Xing gave an interested smile, saying she would come to the company not just as a guest, but also because she wanted Xian Tong to help mend her relationship with Pei. This was because Xian Tong believed she was his ex-girlfriend. Qi Xing then happily kissed Olu on the cheek, saying her brother still didn't know about their relationship, and she was really looking forward to his reaction when he found out they were in love. As for Olu, he knew very well that when that time came, Pei would definitely lose his mind. Tap 13 to 16 that morning, Xian Tong laid out a massive spread of food, but it wasn't for eating. She wanted Pei to help her practice hypnosis for an upcoming psychology certification exam, because she was still weak in that area. Right after that, the hypnosis began. Pei slowly drifted into a trance. His mind felt like it was floating between a dream and reality. Xian Tong skillfully dug for feelings, asking about his ex-girlfriend to see if there was anyone still in his heart. Pei stayed tight-lipped and didn't reveal anything. Seeing this, she shifted to asking about memorable moments between two people. Memories flooded back to Pei, images of a radiant Xian Tong walking down the stairs. The time she held his hand for the wedding ring photos, her eyes full of joy and innocence. He even remembered the moment they kissed in the restaurant when his heart suddenly skipped a beat. Under hypnosis, Pei admitted to himself that he loved Xian Tong and wanted to stay with her. But Xian Tong misunderstood, thinking he was talking about Qi Xing, his sister. She thought to herself that neither of them would back down, so she'd have to step in. Happy with the answer she wanted, she woke Pei up and thanked him for cooperating. When he reminded her they had a date tomorrow, she saw it as a great chance to carry out a picnic plan. The next morning, Xian Tong decided on a bike ride for their date, and Pei went along with it as they started their trip in the pleasant morning air. However, halfway through, they ran into Qi Xing, who had agreed to work with Xian Tong and decided to be a guest in Sihai's livestream room. Qi Xing didn't know the real deal between Pei and Xian Tong. She thought they were lovers and kept teasing him. Annoyed, Pei immediately pushed Qi Xing away and pulled Xian Tong into a tight hug, confirming she was his girlfriend. Xian Tong thought, "You don't need to do this just to spite your ex." Right after, Xian Tong pushed Pei back toward Qi Xing, creating a scene that was both messy and funny. Pei immediately biked after Xian Tong and said, "You know Qi Xing's relationship with the CEO, right?" Xian Tong replied, Of course I do. She's the CEO's sister. This left Pei and feeling both confused and curious, wondering who he actually said he loved while hypnotized. While Xi and Tong went to film some footage for a vlog, Qi Xing approached Pei and commented that his girlfriend was pretty cute. Pei wanted to know Qi Xing's real goal for today, and she explained she knew he couldn't take over the company without a romantic image. So she came to play the girlfriend part to help him. Pei sternly warned his sister not to play dirty tricks, but Qi Xing just hugged him looking innocent. Xi and Tong saw this and thought they were a perfect match. Qi Xing insisted she had no intention of hurting her brother. I mean, would she really just tell their dad that Pei was lying to him? Her eyes were innocent, but full of schemes. Old memories flooded Pei's mind from their school days. Qi Xing used to trick him into thinking she hadn't finished her homework, making him feel bad and give her his work, only for him to get punished by the teacher. She kept coming up with pranks that got Pei in trouble all the time and made their dad disappointed, but it all made him both annoyed and fond of her. Looking at those innocent but mischievous eyes now, Pei decided not to let them trick him again. Qi Xing explained that Xi and Tong misunderstood her as Pei's ex-girlfriend, which is why she was invited as a guest, and she promised to help make the relationship between the two of them work out. Hearing that, Qi Xing felt sad, thinking that her brother was serious about her, Xi and Tong, but she had to show up to clear up the misunderstanding. She couldn't explain it clearly, so she just said she came simply because she missed him. Just then, Xi and Tong slipped and fell in the middle of the road. Pei reacted immediately, running over to pick her up and put her in a chair, then quickly grabbed the bike to get ready to continue the trip. Seeing this, Xi and Tong quickly apologized to Qi Xing for interrupting their conversation, but Qi Xing acted like it was no big deal and left first. Pei used the bike to carry Xi and Tong back. While riding, he said if she really liked Qi Xing that much, he had a way to convince the general manager. On the day Qi Xing did the live stream to introduce products for Xi, Xi and Tong watched from a distance, feeling conflicted when she realized Pei could convince the general manager. It turned out he still had feelings for Qi Xing. Meanwhile, Pei quietly decided he had to find a chance to tell Xi and Tong his real identity, that he was the Xi general manager she always hated. No matter what happened, he chose to move forward. The live stream was going smoothly when an accident suddenly happened. Qi Xing unfortunately hurt her hand. Olu immediately rushed over in a panic to check on her, clearly showing his worry. Pei silently judged that Olu's acting was very good. Meanwhile, Xi and Tong misunderstood, thinking that Olu's concern for Qi Xing came from a deep sibling bond, totally different from the rich family drama she had imagined. Even though everyone was worried and wanted to take Qi Xing to the hospital, she insisted on continuing the shoot, not letting the accident slow down the work. The filming location then moved to an old orphanage. Seeing the campus full of flowers, Xi and Tong was surprised. Pei felt confident, believing everything was going according to his careful plan. As for Xi and Tong, she only thought about how the flowers would be thrown away after the shoot, feeling it was a huge waste when she was curious about the name of the prominent flower in the frame. Pei excitedly told the Greek myth of the Adonis flower, which represents beauty and love. Xi and Tong secretly thought it was just a peony with an exaggerated meaning. Meanwhile, Pei was sure he had made a deep impression on her, right as Pei was about to speak up to clarify his identity and feelings. Xi and Tong quickly misunderstood, thinking he still loved Qi Xing and wanted her help to put in a good word for him. In Xi and Tong's mind, the fact that he convinced the general manager to collaborate was only because he couldn't forget his ex. Before Pei could explain, the director announced the end of the shoot. Xi and Tong left immediately, leaving him angry and helpless. Backstage, Olu and Qi Xing were talking intimately. Pei felt that level of care was a bit too much, while Xi and Tong was even more convinced that the sibling bond between them was extremely strong. When Olu announced that Qi Xing's hand had no serious problems and thanked everyone, Xi and Tong turned to Pei, wondering why he didn't take this chance to express his feelings. Pei only reluctantly complimented that Qi Xing looked very beautiful today, feeling frustrated that his confession plan had totally failed. In the evening, Pei asked Xi and Tong to go out to eat. Before eating, she didn't forget to take a check-in photo to get a discount, which made him feel both helpless and amused. While chatting, Xi and Tong was curious about how he convinced Galileo to sign the contract. Pei explained that the guy wasn't as bad as she thought. He just had to state his point clearly to reach an agreement. Even so, Xi and Tong still believed he couldn't let go of his feelings for Qi Xing, thinking his worry when she got hurt said everything. In Pei's eyes, Xi and Tong was both naive and trying to act smart, making him not know whether to laugh or sigh. The next morning, when Qi Xing suddenly showed up at the house, Pei-in couldn't help but be surprised. Xi and Tong calmly announced that today was her birthday, and she cooked personally so the two of them could order whatever they wanted. Qi Xing intentionally brought up the Lu Xiang sponge cake that was a shared memory of theirs, making Pei-in very uncomfortable, while Xi and Tong quietly watched his reaction. When a meal was done, Xi and Tong frankly expressed that her goal in inviting them was to get them to make up, while also revealing that the relationship between her and Pei-in was just fake. This news left Pei-in stunned, while Qi Xing was skeptical. Xi and Tong kept insisting that Pei-in was just trying to hide his feelings, because at the set, he was more worried about Qi Xing than anyone else. Despite Pei-in wanting to speak up and explain, Xi and Tong was determined to push them back together, leaving him completely speechless. Tipsy from the beer, Xi and Tong insisted on going back to her room to rest first and forced Pei-in to stay and talk with Qi Xing. When he didn't agree, she went back to drinking until she collapsed on the table. Qi Xing then realized that Pei-in was more patient with Xi and Tong than she thought, thinking he had fallen too deep. Right then, Xi and Tong suddenly woke up and spoke loudly about the plan to help Qi Xing take back top management control of Cihai. In her drunken state, Xi and Tong vented all her frustration about her boss, thinking he was narrow-minded, didn't recognize other people's talents, and intentionally pressured Qi Xing just because she was a girl. She held Qi Xing's hand. Understanding the reason, she changed her name to take control of her own destiny. At the same time, Xi and Tong also revealed her own pain about being abandoned by her parents and not knowing when her real birthday was. Always having to work twice as hard to prove her worth but still being ignored by everyone. Pei-in quietly wiped Xi and Tong's tears, feeling a rising determination to protect her and help her fight against all injustice. Then he carried her to her room to rest. Before leaving, he told Qi Xing that what Xi and Tong just said was also exactly what he thought, but it all just came from a desire to protect her. Qi Xing calmly replied that she was grown up enough to protect herself and him too, and then she quietly left. When Xi and Tong woke up and stepped out onto the balcony, she saw that Pei-in had prepared a lot of flowers. He expressed his wish that her future days would always be full of color and that he would always be by her side. Faced with such incredibly sweet words, Xi and Tong got flustered, made an excuse about a headache, and went back to her room. That night, Xi and Tong tossed and turned, unable to sleep. She kept wondering if the things Pei-in said came from real feelings, then quickly denied it, thinking he was just a playboy and everything was just an act. Pei-in in the room next door was in the same state, his thoughts wandering with no way out. Finally, both of them stepped out onto the balcony at the same time, accidentally looked down, and were stunned to see Qi Xing and Lu sitting next to each other in an intimate atmosphere. The next morning, Xi and Tong learned that the chairman of Cihai had been betrothed to a fiancé since childhood. They had been together for many years, and there had never been any rumors of affairs. At the same time, she was reminded that Galileo and Qi Xing looked alike, and then she was shown a magazine photo. At this point, Xi and Tong was shocked to realize that Pei-in was actually Galileo. Anger immediately rushed up because she realized she had been lied to this whole time. Carrying the magazine, Xi and Tong aggressively prepared to burst into Pei-in's office to confront him. However, she accidentally heard a heated argument going on inside between Pei-in and Lu. When Lu admitted the relationship started back in high school, Pei-in got even more furious, realizing he had been tricked by Lu's acting for 8 long years. Lu's ambitious answer made Xi and Tong, standing outside, unable to keep from laughing. Meanwhile, Pei-in was so mad his stomach turned, and he was determined not to let this guy keep messing with his sister. Just then, Xi and Tong walked in. Seeing her, both Pei-in and Lu immediately changed their attitude because they both thought she still didn't know the truth, and Xi and Tong wasn't in a rush to expose them. She calmly presented the plan for the Cihai livestream room's debut happening this afternoon. In it, the CEO would participate as a normal employee, and his real identity would be kept secret. When Pei-in immediately refused, Xi and Tong brought up more detailed content. A puppet game. In it, the CEO has to complete every random request from the netizens. Hearing this, Pei-in acted excited instead, even suggesting adding more shock factors like doing a handstand while washing hair or changing outfits right on air. Xi and Tong laughed, forced Lu to agree, and then left to prepare for the livestream. Lu suspected Pei and was using work to get personal revenge, but Pei-in just casually thought it was all for work efficiency. In the afternoon, when Pei-in and Lu showed up at the scene, Xi and Tong gave a brief intro of the livestream content. Qi Xing would start with an introduction of the Cihai brand image, followed by a live interaction with netizens. When it came time for the CEO to go on air for the challenges, Lu was trembling and about to step out, but Xi and Tong pulled him back, making everyone realize Pei An's true identity was exposed. He immediately tried to find a way to hide, but Xi and Tong still forced him to get in front of the lens and do the challenge. During the livestream, Qixing announced that the requests would be drawn randomly, and the CEO of Cihai would fulfill every single one of them. The first draw requested a dance. At first, Pei was shy, but he gradually got into it, dancing more and more, shaking his hips and spinning around, with no professional image left at all. Xi and Tong sat below and laughed so hard she couldn't close her mouth. She was then stunned to see him singing while doing a handstand, dancing wildly, and then chugging a whole bottle of water on air. After the performance ended, Pei went to the post-production room, gasping for air because he was exhausted. Right then, Olu excitedly ran in to report that the traffic had spiked and the livestream's results were way beyond expectations. But as soon as he saw Pei An's glaring face, he immediately made a run for it. Looking at Xi and Tong, Pei An thought to himself that he didn't want to hide it from her. He was just afraid she'd know he was the person she hated, and even more afraid she'd find out his real feelings for her. Xi and Tong, on the other hand, thought he didn't tell the truth only because he was afraid she would get back at him. When she reminded him there was still a lot of work to handle, she left smugly. Back in the live stream room, a netizen made one last request. The CEO had to perform a deep, heartfelt confession. So, Pei was forced to confess to his stuffed frog, thinking the person wearing that frog suit was Xi and Tong. He sincerely expressed his feelings in front of hundreds of thousands of viewers. He admitted that even though their time together had many ups and downs, he still couldn't control his heart and wanted to say that he loved her. Xi and Tong clapped excitedly from below, but earlier in the post-production room, Olu had revealed that this frog prank was added by Qixing herself with the intention of matchmaking the two of them. At that time, Xi and Tong had insisted that it was impossible between her and Pei An, claiming that the spark was just an illusion from being near a rich young master like him and wasn't genuine. She then asked Olu to wear the stuffed frog suit. Now, knowing the person in the frog suit was actually Olu, Pei An immediately pushed him away and went inside in a huff. That night, in a fit of annoyance, Pei An secretly changed the password to Xi and Tong's Xiaolan Shu account. On the other side, when Xi and Tong checked, she discovered her account had been hacked. Tap 17 to 20, a sudden message from Xi and Tong made Pei An feel a bit uneasy. He quickly texted back to test the waters, and Xi and Tong replied that she was still a little mad, but what's done is done and they should move on. As everyone makes mistakes, the important thing is knowing how to fix them. That answer made Pei An feel both relieved and confused. At the same time, her senior, La Ku, came to Xi and Tong to pour his heart out. He had just gone through a breakup, and his ex had quickly found someone new, which left him in a state of confusion. Meanwhile, Pei An received a message from Xi and Tong saying she wanted to chat because she enjoyed talking to him. When Xi and Tong sent another hint about having a drink together to relax, Pei An started having romantic thoughts, thinking she might be about to confess her feelings. He proactively brought over a glass of wine, waiting for a confession that never came. On the contrary, Xi and Tong was busy texting to comfort La Ku, advising him to let go of the past and move on. A cheers emoji suddenly appeared on Pei An's phone screen. He looked up and saw Xi and Tong also raising her glass of water to drink. So he wondered why they were chatting through text even though they were sitting near each other. Xi and Tong answered that talking online made her feel safer. That comment made Pei An laugh, thinking she was just adorable, totally unaware that the person texting him wasn't the real Xi and Tong because someone else had already taken over her account. When Pei An was asked if he wanted to listen to music, La Ku also sent a song to Xi and Tong at the exact same time. Pei An thought everything was just dancing for fun, so he stepped up and danced in front of Xi and Tong, gathering all his courage to show his sincerity. Xi and Tong vaguely sensed something and felt like she might have found a direction for her emotions. Pei An got even more excited and pulled her in to join the dance, while Xi and Tong gradually felt dizzy, got a headache, and quietly went back to her room to rest. Not long after, Pei An received another message inviting him to a movie and immediately replied with total enthusiasm. Meanwhile, Xi and Tong messaged La Ku, proactively inviting him to a movie, and La Ku agreed. Believing this was an important date, Pei An even rented out the whole movie theater. The next morning, he told the staff to prepare fireworks, gifts, and flowers, just waiting for the signal to act. When Xi and Tong showed up, Pei An thought she was continuing to play that hard-to-get game with him. But when La Ku also walked up, he started to feel like things weren't going the way he had imagined. Inside the theater, Xi and Tong mostly talked to La Ku, which made Pei An feel jealous and insecure. He realized today's meeting meant a lot to both of them, and each person brought their own expectations. When Xi and Tong said she felt like she was shining today, Payan sank even deeper into his sweet illusions. Right then, Qixing and Olu happened to show up at the theater. Qixing was surprised that the rumored confession event had turned into a meeting of 3 people, and Olu didn't understand what was going on either. The movie started, and Xi and Tong burst into tears while watching, making both Payan and La Ke constantly hand her tissues. Seeing that, Payan suddenly realized today might not be the right time to express his feelings. When the movie ended, Xi and Tong announced that she and La Ke had an art exhibit to attend, so she asked to leave first. Payan was so frustrated that he unconsciously scratched his head, which made the staff mistake it for the signal to act, and they immediately pulled down the banners and got everything ready. Faced with that sight, Xi and Tong gave a bright smile and thanked Payan for helping her find the courage to be true to her heart. Right after that, she frankly expressed her feelings to La Ke, admitting that she had liked him for a very long time. La Ke was stunned but then accepted those feelings. The staff quickly brought out flowers to congratulate them, and confetti flew everywhere. Xi and Tong was radiant with happiness, while Payan was frozen, totally unable to believe what was happening in front of his eyes. Qixing could only cover her face and laugh nonstop. That evening, when Xi and Tong returned home, Payan finally questioned her about the vague messages from before. Only then did Xi and Tong reveal that her account had been hacked for many days and she was currently in the process of getting it back. The truth left Payan stunned, and he started to suspect who had used that account to mess with him and lead his emotions. When he checked his phone again, he found another fake message asking for urgent money because a family member had been in an accident. His anger made him drop his phone on the ground. The next day, Xi and Tong happily announced that she had gotten her account back. Just then, Olu called to report that Su Lan had finished buying back the account and the entire chat history had been wiped clean. Payan immediately ordered them to call the police because the imposter had committed fraud for a large amount of money and would definitely pay a heavy price. La Ke took Xi and Tong to his solo exhibition, knowing she had given up painting after graduation to make a living. He highly valued her talent, thinking she was even better than him, and offered to support her with tools and free painting classes as an investment. Right at that moment, Payan appeared, using the excuse of visiting the exhibition to check things out for himself. In reality, just before that, he had found out that La Ke was the only son of the law group with a complicated love life, having 16 public relationships and even more private ones. Realizing La Ke was a typical player, Payan immediately became wary. He asked La Ke to give him a tour. When La Ke stepped away for a moment, Payan pulled Xi and Tong aside, making up an excuse that his dad's love agents were at it again, claiming that private dates like this were risky because cameras were everywhere. Hearing that, Xi and Tong calmly asked for 4 times her usual pay for the danger, and Payan immediately agreed without hesitation. While Xi and Tong was busy admiring the paintings, La Ke tried several times to get close, wanting to take the chance to put his arm around her waist. Payan couldn't control his anger and immediately slapped his hand hard. When Xi and Tong turned her head out of curiosity, Payan quickly changed his attitude and pretended to high-five La Ke as if they were both on the same page. Not long after, La Ke pointed to a painting that once used Xi and Tong as a model. Looking at the artwork, old memories suddenly flooded back into her heart. She remembered her time studying art. Because the tuition was too expensive, she chose to start working early and had to give up her dream. La Ke acted regretful, saying that if she had spoken up sooner back then, he definitely would have helped. Xi and Tong's eyes lit up with emotion, but on the other hand, Payan was clearly jealous and immediately asked about the price of the painting. La Ke just laughed and said his paintings weren't worth much. The truly valuable thing was their lost youth. Xi and Tong agreed, saying that true art is always born from life experiences. Seeing the two of them getting along so well, Payan was both jealous and scared that Xi and Tong would accidentally fall into a trap. La Ke confessed that up until now, only Xi and Tong had truly supported his art path, while his parents always forced him to take over the family business. Xi and Tong sincerely encouraged him, believing he would succeed in both art and business. When La Ke tried to grab her hand, Payan immediately jumped in, grabbed his hand, and hugged him like a friend, confirming his support in the name of friendship. Afterward, the 3 of them sat down for tea. La Ke proactively shifted the conversation to business, mentioning Chi as an important client and judging it to be a company with great potential and a good reputation. Even though it was an old company, it was always looking for innovation. Hearing this, Payan couldn't hide his smugness. However, when La Ke commented that Chi's new CEO has an extreme working style with big hidden risks, Payan couldn't help but feel uneasy. La Ke even bluntly suggested that if working at Chi wasn't fun, Xi and Tong could definitely come to his company. She gently replied that work was still going great for now, and she hadn't thought about leaving. Right after that, Xi and Tong suggested a private dinner date with La Ko. When Payan wanted to come along, she frankly said she didn't want anyone else there, so Payan reluctantly accepted. Back home, he immediately called Oh Lu and Qi Xing over, claiming La Ko was a total scumbag. Qi Xing couldn't help but ask why he helped her confess to someone else if he liked Xi and Tong so much. Payan could only explain that it was an accident, making both Qi Xing and Oh Lu laugh so hard they couldn't stop. At night, Payan sat in a dark corner waiting for Xi and Tong to come home. When she walked in, she was clearly shocked, not understanding why he didn't turn on the lights or what he had been thinking lately. Xi and Tong thought his actions were both contradictory and annoying. Payan worried that La Ko might not be as good as she thought, but Xi and Tong coldly insisted that their relationship was just cooperative. Payan cited the contract terms, saying she wasn't allowed to date during the partnership. Xi and Tong immediately fought back, saying she wasn't dating at all. The theater, the banners, and the flowers were all his doing, and besides, he was the one who encouraged her to be brave and confess. Those fast-paced arguments left Payan so mad he was speechless and couldn't fight back. That night, Xi and Tong went back to her room but tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The scene at the theater kept playing in her head, where she'd been too impulsive and rushed to confess to La Ko. Payan carefully checked the outdoor broadcast plan. Xi and Tong confirmed the files were transparent and had been approved by the departments. Trusting the fairness of their cooperation, Payan signed off on it. However, as soon as Xi and Tong left the room, he immediately told Oh Lu to rescan all the data, suspecting someone was intentionally faking the numbers to lower the weights. 3 hours of continuous live streaming brought in results beyond expectations. The total transaction value quickly passed the 10 million mark. Just then, La Ko appeared to thank Qi Xing for her enthusiastic support. She just smiled back and left. Not long after, Payan also arrived at the outdoor livestream location. By now, La Ko knew his real identity as president one of the C-High group, so he acted polite and felt bad about the thoughtless things he had said at the previous exhibition. Payan just gave a light smile and didn't mind. La Ko also secretly promised to keep everything a secret because he still mistakenly thought Payan wasn't interested in women. When Xi and Tong came back and saw the two of them looking close, she was surprised. La Ko mocked himself for being blind before and not realizing the friend standing in front of him was the young master one of C-High. Xi and Tong smiled and shifted the topic to today's broadcast performance, announcing that tomorrow's livestream would start at dawn with the theme of watching the sunrise together. Hearing that, Payan immediately suggested staying overnight to join in. Xi and Tong considered that there wasn't enough room in the tents. Oh Lu would stay with Qi Xing. So Payan had to choose someone to share with. He casually said he would share a tent with La Ko. Even though he was nervous, La Ko still forced a smile and agreed. Xi and Tong held the vlog camera to record their time together. Every time La Ko handed a meat skewer or a water bottle to Xi and Tong, Payan would quickly snatch it first, which gradually made La Ko panic, even misunderstanding that Payan had designs on him. To stop La Ko from getting close to Xi and Tong, Payan intentionally shook a carbonated water bottle hard and handed it to him. When the cap was opened, water sprayed all over him. Xi and Tong worriedly planned to run over and help, but Payan was faster, bringing tissues to wipe La Ko's face and even taking off his jacket to put on him. That scene terrified La Ko, and he scrambled to hide in the tent. Late at night, Payan went looking for a lighter to start the charcoal and found it was missing. When he went into the tent to get it, he suddenly stood very close to La Ko, less than 1 centimeter away. La Ko was so scared his hands shook as he handed him a lighter. Right before the live stream started, Xi and Tong said she would go ahead and told the two of them to rest. Payan then asked Oh Lu to go support Xi and Tong. Left alone, La Ko finally gathered the courage to set his boundaries, stating that he and Payan weren't the same type of person. He respected the other's choice, but he had feelings for Xi and Tong. Payan also frankly admitted that he felt the same way. Hearing that, La Ko finally breathed a sigh of relief, explaining that his feelings for Xi and Tong were just pure appreciation between male and female friends, and he hoped it wouldn't affect their current relationship. Payan replied that if La Ko was sincere, he was willing to give his blessing, but he also warned him to know himself well. If he had any bad intentions, don't blame Payan for turning on him. La Ko reaffirmed that there was only friendship between him and Xi and Tong. Payan said no more and went to rest. As for La Ko, seeing Qi Xing sitting alone, he walked over to start a conversation. He confessed that he often watched her live streams at night, especially when he was most lonely. He didn't just admire her talent, but was also drawn to her unique charm. When Qi Xing mentioned Xi and Tong, Laku insisted that there was no romantic relationship between him and Xian Tong. He was just afraid of hurting her, so he needed more time to explain. He also frankly admitted that this livestream for La Shi was specially designed for Qi Xing, and expressed his view that Si Hai should let someone more capable take over the inheritance. Laku even made a bold assumption. If the two of them got married, Si Hai and the La Group would merge into the largest commercial group in Jiangcheng. He is ready to put all his effort into making Qi Xing the heir. To outsiders, they might just seem like obedient people, but in reality, they're like lions on the savannah waiting for their chance. Hearing that, Qi Xing only smiled and replied with a promise of a happy collaboration. The next day, Qi Xing went to Pei Yan's house to meet Xian Tong privately. After finishing her investigation, she brought some important news. This time they caught a big fish. It turns out that since his school days, Laku has often used the excuse of finding models to approach and then trick many girls. For years, the La Group has secretly nurtured ambitions, expanding into the online business world, and Laku happened to be in charge of this sector at the right time. Because of that, for a long time, he has sneakily and blatantly caused damage to Si Hai. The fact that the livestream data was fake this time is also directly related to Laku. After hearing that, Xian Tong finally woke up and realized that Laku's proactive approach to her wasn't accidental, but stemmed from her working at Si Hai and being in charge of the livestream sector. The next morning, when Chairman Wen found out that Xian was actually in Turkey and had never dated Pei Yan, he was extremely angry. However, he still acted like he didn't know yet, went directly to Pei in Xian Tong's house, and suddenly asked when the two planned to get married. Pei Yan immediately grabbed Xian Tong's hand and calmly announced that they planned to register their marriage next month. Chairman Wen was angry because he was almost tricked, so Xian Tong stepped up to apologize and take the blame. Pei Yan also took responsibility, but Xian Tong frankly admitted she was the one who felt the spark first, and explained the meeting started from going on a blind date for her best friend Xian, and then they both caught feelings from the first time they met. Because her family background wasn't good, fearing they weren't a social match, and worrying his parents would be disappointed, she came up with that clumsy plan herself. Hearing that, Chairman Wen and his wife curiously asked what she loved about their son. Xian Tong sincerely expressed that in everyone's eyes, Pei Yan is a CEO, but in her eyes, he's just a mature, lovely guy who always cares for and protects her. Being with him, she feels safe and can trust him. He's not just a good friend, but also an ideal lover. Seeing Xian Tong talk until she was on the verge of tears, Pei Yan's parents smiled with satisfaction, while Pei Yan couldn't hide his happiness. Chairman Wen softened his voice and said that when family doesn't care about social status, what they value most is character. As Pei Yan's parents were about to leave, Xian Tong politely asked them to stay for a meal, promising to cook a delicious dinner. Right after that, she pulled Pei Yan into the kitchen, joking while they worked that her acting earlier was pretty good. During the meal, Xian Tong kept toasting Chairman Wen. Not long after, she got tipsy and collapsed on the table. Pei Yan had to help her into her room to rest. Just as he was about to go out, he heard footsteps, so he rushed back to the bed and lay down next to Xian Tong, pretending to be asleep. Pei Yan's mother saw that scene, just smiled, left a bowl of hangover soup, and quietly walked out. While turning over, Xian Tong accidentally touched her lips to Pei Yan's, making him freeze and his heart race. He immediately scrambled off the bed in a panic, while Xian Tong quickly pulled the blanket over her head, her heart also racing from embarrassment. It turns out she was only pretending to be asleep just now. The next morning after Pei Yan's parents had left, seeing her walk into the house so casually, Pei Yan couldn't help but wonder if she was really drunk last night or not. A while later, seeing Xian Tong lightheartedly exercising, he thought to himself that she probably didn't remember anything about last night. But he had no idea that her exercising was just to clear the messy thoughts in her head. The next morning, Xian Tong asked Pei Yan to help her pick an outfit. He pointed to a white dress, but she chose a black one instead. At today's party, Xian Tong agreed to show up as Laku's girlfriend. When Laku's parents saw her, they immediately asked about her family out of curiosity. Xian Tong honestly told them she was an orphan. Hearing that, Laku's mother immediately looked down on her, saying she was trying to climb the social ladder. The situation got even more awkward when Laku took Xian Tong to meet Pei Yan's parents. She stood frozen, both surprised and confused. Chairman Wen commented in admiration that they were truly a perfect match. The La family is so lucky. Chairman La replied that he heard Pei and was also getting engaged soon, so it was a double celebration for both families. Right then, Qi Xing showed up, called Xian Tong sister-in-law, and wondered why she wasn't with her brother. Laku asked about it, but Xian Tong promised to explain later. Qi Xing revealed to La Ku that Xi and Tong and Pei An were getting married, which made La Ku extremely angry. Xi and Tong quickly explained that she and Pei An were just fake lovers to hide the truth. But Pei An walked up and grabbed her hand, and Qi Xing immediately showed their love contract to her dad, exposing the deception. Xi and Tong and Pei An were both shocked, while La Ku scolded her for signing an immoral contract, even comparing her to a call girl. Chairman Wen was so disappointed that he slapped Pei An. Pei An explained that everything happened because he forced her to sign it as the CEO. When La Ku's mother was about to rush over and slap Xi and Tong, Pei An immediately stopped her, stating that this circus should end. Qi Xing brought out a recording as proof, showing that Pei An had planned for her to fall. Lu stood up as a witness, revealing that the faked livestream data this time was staged by Pei An and Xi and Tong to trick Qi Xing. Realizing the plan was exposed, Pei An angrily called La Ku a hopeless punk. La Ku still looked smug, claiming that as a supplier for Sea for 10 years, his family didn't want Sea to be ruined by Pei An. Then La Ku brought out a USB containing proof of his own family's faked livestream data. Chairman Wen immediately gave the USB to Lu to check. When Lu nodded in confirmation, Pei An and Xi and Tong smiled, knowing that their entire acting performance had succeeded in getting the La family's fake data. La Ku had no idea he had fallen into a trap, still confidently declaring that Lady Qi Xing was the worthy heir of Sea in the future. Xi and Tong laughed sarcastically and told La Ku bluntly that she used to see him as her dream guy, but that was just a temporary illusion. Now looking straight at him, she felt disgusted and nauseous. Qi Xing also announced to La Ku that she was already the legal heir of Sea and was currently operating under a co-CEO system. Lu released a recording in which La Ku had suggested helping Qi Xing publicly expose the fake relationship between Pei An and Xi and Tong to embarrass Pei An's parents and hurt them, while also going public with a livestream incident. La Ku even bluntly called Xi and Tong a doll on a shelf, a pawn to be sacrificed for his own future. But with all the schemes exposed in front of everyone, La Ku was pushed to the peak of his anger. Chairman Wen reminded Chairman La that he didn't intend to press charges further, but his son had almost ruined the family and the business of Sea. Chairman La angrily scolded his son and then left in a rage, making the rest of the people unable to help but laugh at this chaotic scene. Tap 21 to 24 the next morning, Pei An's mother saw her husband still staring at the cameras, and she wondered why. Chairman Wen just smiled and thought to himself that Xi and Tong is a good girl, and he couldn't let her be treated unfairly. He felt he needed to create a little surprise, a more special experience to make her happy. As soon as Pei An heard his dad was at the company, he went to the office to ask why. Chairman Wen gently reminded his son that it seemed like no one in the company knew about the relationship between the two of them. When Pei An confirmed this, he advised that this wasn't how a man should act. He needed to tell the whole world that Xi and Tong was his girlfriend. Following his dad's advice, Pei An took a bouquet of fresh flowers straight to Xi and Tong, gave it to her, and politely invited her to have lunch with him. All the employees stood there frozen watching, while Chairman Wen just smiled with satisfaction. Xi and Tong took the bouquet and smiled as she agreed. On the way, Chairman Wen asked Xi and Tong what she wanted to eat and listed countless suggestions, but she only chose barbecue pork buns and butter bread. The chairman immediately called his staff, ordered them to prepare, and emphasized they would be there in 10 minutes. He also told Pei An to get ready to head to the base, where a helicopter was already waiting. When Xi and Tong saw the helicopter, her jaw dropped in surprise and excitement, and she kept asking Pei An to take photos to save the special moment. When the helicopter landed in Macau, Chairman Wen explained that if she wanted to enjoy butter bread the right way, she had to come here for it to be perfect. Xi and Tong wondered if this was expensive, but he just laughed loudly and said money was nothing. He said just to tell him what she wanted to eat, and he would serve it no matter where it was. Back at the company, Director Hua and Stella curiously asked Xi and Tong about her relationship with the CEO, but she skillfully dodged it by lying that it was just an online romance. Immediately, every corner of the company started buzzing with gossip about Xi and Tong and Pei An's love. Some rumored she was an illegitimate daughter of the Xi and family in Hong Kong, while others said she was pregnant before marriage. Hearing these things in the bathroom, Xi and Tong told herself that she turned out to be quite good at spreading rumors too. In the elevator, a few employees even called her a well-trained predator. The words reached Pei An's ears, and he immediately corrected them seriously. Since joining the marketing department, Xi and Tong has created more value than all the other departments combined. He admitted it was hard not to notice an outstanding woman like her, and he proactively held Xi and Tong's hand and pulled her out. He reassured her and told her not to let the gossip bother her. Right after that, Pei led Xi and Tong to meet his dad. Chairman Wen gave a warm smile and announced that 4 top chefs specializing in various cuisines would serve 3 meals a day to Xi and Tong. She smiled and thanked him, but he didn't stop there. The chairman also brought out a series of luxury bags and high-end clothes, saying he had checked her Shaolin shoe and saw she liked many brands. So he contacted them so that from now on, every quarter when they release new products, they will send them here for her to choose. Finally, Chairman Wen handed over the whole C-High group to Pei, telling the two of them to love each other and be happy but still stay focused on work. When he left, the whole office was filled with joy and excitement, leaving Pei and Xi and Tong with an indescribable feeling of happiness. The next day, Xi and Tong brought Pei in the agreement to terminate their partnership. The moment he saw that paper, Pei couldn't hide his sadness, but in the end, he still signed his name very decisively. No matter how much money Xi and Tong asked for, he accepted it without any hesitation. Holding the finished contract in her hand, Xi and Tong should have been relieved, or even happy, because everything had ended exactly as planned. But instead, a feeling of emptiness and a regret she couldn't name rose up in her heart. Returning to Pei house, she quietly packed her clothes, piece by piece, while wondering how she could escape these tangled emotions. Perhaps even she didn't realize when she had fallen in love with Pei. Before leaving, Xi and Tong stood there and looked at the house carefully, as if wanting to memorize it for the last time, and then she left silently without leaving a trace. At the company, Lu rushed over to tell Pei and that Xi and Tong had resigned. Hearing the news, he immediately went home, only to realize she was really gone. He quickly called Xi and Tong, but she calmly said the contract was over and there was no reason to stay anymore. She briefly explained that her resignation was because someone else offered a higher salary to hire her. After hanging up, Xi and Tong reassured herself that Pei's feelings were probably just a temporary dependency that developed during their partnership. On this side, Pei was drowned in sadness, constantly drinking beer to drown his sorrows. Even though Xi and Tong spoke decisively, deep down she was still waiting for a call from him. She told herself that if he called back before midnight, she would definitely answer. When the phone suddenly rang, Xi and Tong excitedly answered. But the person on the other end was just a credit company asking about a loan. Meanwhile, Pei accidentally dialed his father's number. The hidden feelings in his heart were accidentally poured out, saying that even though they were a contract couple, his feelings for Xi and Tong were real. After hearing this, Chairman Wen wasn't surprised. In fact, he was very satisfied because everything was exactly as he predicted. The next morning, Chairman Wen showed up at Pei's house, took back all his assets, and announced that his position as CEO was temporarily invalid. In his eyes, someone who doesn't even dare to face their own feelings isn't qualified to handle big tasks. Then, he proactively called Xi and Tong for a meeting. During that meeting, Chairman Wen spoke his mind clearly. He believed it was entirely possible for the two of them to turn fake into real, and even said it was like getting into the wrong wedding sedan, but marrying the right person. Even though Xi and Tong thought the chance of falling in love over time was very low, Chairman Wen saw right through her avoidance. With the experience of someone who has been through it all, he confirmed that Pei truly liked her, and she wasn't indifferent either. He advised Xi and Tong to bravely face her work, her life, and most importantly, her own inner self. Before ending the talk, he suggested she return to C-High to work the next day, but in a completely new position. The morning after that, when Xi and Tong showed up at the company, she officially took over as the acting CEO of the C-High group, becoming Pei's direct boss. Pei was now just a secretary, and Lu became the secretary's secretary. For Pei, the title didn't matter anymore. Just seeing Xi and Tong back made him happy. Not long after Xi and Tong left the office, Li suddenly appeared and claimed to be her biological father. During the meal that followed, he said he had reached out to the former director of the orphanage, which made finding her easy. Hearing this, Xi and Tong couldn't hold back her tears. She took him back to her rented house and finally asked why she was abandoned years ago. Li choked up as he explained that he never wanted to give up his child. It was just that he was too poor back then and couldn't afford to raise her, fearing she would suffer if she stayed with him. Her mother left after giving birth, and he had been carrying that guilt for many years. Now he only hoped to use the rest of his life to make it up to his daughter. Xi and Tong quietly walked into the room, telling him to wait a bit so she could clean another room for him to stay in. The next day, back at the office, Xi and Tong assigned tasks to Pei, requiring him to send a daily work summary report via email, while also emphasizing that all communication between them was strictly limited to email. After saying that, she left right away, leaving Pei feeling frustrated and annoyed. In the evening, Xi and Tong brought dinner home for Li. He gave her a banana, hoping she would call him Dad, but Xi and Tong still couldn't say the word. The next morning at the company, she felt sluggish, her eyes unfocused like she had lost her soul. Pei noticed something was wrong and was secretly worried. Even though Xi and Tong just brushed it off with a smile, insisting she was fine, the feeling of unease in Pei-An's heart became more and more clear. At home, when Xi and Tong saw her father's bruised face, she couldn't hide her suspicion. Yulai confessed that he was truly cornered, and that's why he came to his daughter. For many years, he had borrowed money everywhere and was so deep into gambling that his home was destroyed. He said he just wanted to see Xi and Tong one last time so he could close his eyes in peace. However, Xi and Tong didn't believe him. She had gone to the police station to find out and knew clearly that he had been gambling constantly for years, pushing himself into a dead end. This time, coming back was indeed because he had no other way out. She told him frankly that if he gave up gambling, he could stay, but if he continued his old ways, he shouldn't expect to get even a penny from her. The next morning, the old man went to Xi and Tong's company again to cause trouble, loudly accusing her of being an unfilial daughter who kicked her father out, leaving him to freeze all night. Olu stepped out and led Yulai in to see the CEO. When Pei-An found out the man in front of him was Xi and Tong's biological father, he calmly said that if he had any requests, he should state them. Taking that chance, Yulai demanded a bride price of 200,000. Pei-An immediately agreed, but stated that this money wasn't a bride price but a promise between the two of them, while also demanding that he immediately stop all current behavior toward Xi and Tong. Yulai quickly nodded in agreement. When Xi and Tong returned home and saw her father appear, she was surprised. Yulai looked smug, saying the CEO seemed to value her a lot. He said that after the two of them got married, he would have someone to rely on for the rest of his life, so he would stay by his daughter's side to take good care of her. Hearing this, Xi and Tong angrily kicked him out of the house. Unexpectedly, Yulai slapped her hard. Just as he was about to hit her again, Pei-An showed up in time, kicked him down, and beat him up, then helped Xi and Tong up. In desperation, Yulai threatened and demanded Pei and give him 1 million yuan, or else he would drag Xi and Tong to jump off a building with him. Sitting in the car, Xi and Tong tearfully asked why Pei-An gave that old man so much money. Pei-An held her hand tight and reassured her that he had recorded everything just now. That amount of money was enough to sue him for extortion and ensure she would never have to see that person again. Xi and Tong burst into tears, saying the man was completely different from what she had imagined. And then she hugged Pei-An tightly through her tears, expressing her gratitude and looking for a shoulder to lean on at this moment. Afterward, Pei-An drove Xi and Tong back to his house. In a quiet space, Xi and Tong shared that she had imagined her biological parents countless times, but never thought the truth would be so cruel. That's also why many people don't understand why she always works so hard, tries to earn a lot of money, and learns how to love herself. Because in her mind, only money could bring a sense of security. But at this moment, she realized it didn't seem to be quite like that, because Pei-An also brought her that sense of security. She clearly felt the care he had for her, she just didn't know how to respond. Pei-An gently advised her to listen to her heart. Right after that, he brought Xi and Tong a small cake. He confessed that he had intentionally looked at her birth certificate and knew today was her birthday. At this moment, Xi and Tong was shocked to realize that the boy who once brought her a cake when she was little was actually Pei-An. When Xi and Tong accepted the feelings he had for her, Pei-An leaned in and gave her a gentle kiss. In the room covered in dim light, Xi and Tong proactively moved closer to Pei-An, touching him as if to challenge him, reminding him of the price he would have to pay for being with her. Pei-An didn't hesitate and let her do whatever she wanted. Immediately, Xi and Tong pushed him onto the bed and declared that today she would definitely make him suffer in her hands. She also said that since he wanted to marry her, she would give him a taste of what people call the joy of marriage. However, it was all just a stage scene. Outside, Qi Xing stood by the camera, looking at the scene in front of her and couldn't help but laugh. At this point, Pei-An seriously expressed that his feelings for Xi and Tong had absolutely nothing to do with the family or any benefits. It was simply because he loved her. After saying that, he immediately kissed Xi and Tong. Qi Xing immediately realized that moment was no longer acting but a very real scheme of Pei-An's. She signaled all the staff to leave, giving the two of them some private space. In an atmosphere full of emotion, Pei-An and Xi and Tong were drowned in the intoxication of love, clinging to each other and unwilling to part. The next morning, Olu frankly admitted to Chairman 1 that he and Qi Xing had been in love for 8 years. Chairman 1 then turned to ask Xi and Tong and Pei-An how long they had known each other. Xi and Tong grabbed Pei-An's hand and said that the two of them had just extended their contract once again. Hearing this, Chairman 1 smiled brightly and said since today was the weekend, they should just go on a date together. Seeing his children happy, he was overjoyed, and even continued watching CEO dramas while dreaming of the day he would soon hold a grandchild. Not long after, Qi Xing suddenly announced on a live stream to her fans that she was getting married. That news shocked Olu. Right on the live stream, Qi Xing took out a ring, gave it to Olu, and shared with the fans that after going through 81 trials, as long as they reached the final goal, all the hardships no longer mattered. Under the gaze of tens of thousands of people, Olu immediately put the ring on Qi Xing, watching that romantic scene through the screen. Xian Tong couldn't hide her excitement. Seeing that, Pan gently said that in every second he spent with her, Xian Tong's image was deeply engraved in his mind. He promised to do his best to love her forever. Then he took out an engagement ring and asked Xian Tong if she wanted to marry him. In front of the sparkling ring, Xian Tong emotionally nodded in agreement. The movie ends here.